Welcome to this episode of Extravagant Generosity, where we reflect on how the practice of generosity impacts our communities, touches our lives, and works for a more just world for all. My name is Andrew Warner, Generosity Outreach Officer for the national setting of the United Church of Christ. Before moving on to the practical ways in which we engage an annual stewardship campaign, I want to think with you about a few questions. And first, I want us to think about why people would make a pledge to a church. Now, there are lots of ways in which we can fund the mission and ministry of our congregations. And in fact, every congregation uses multiple strategies. There are some churches that fund part of their work through a draw on their endowments, others that engage in rental to generate income for their church. Many congregations practice fundraisers. I even know of one church that raises $40,000 a year through a rummage sale. Other congregations have bake sales or spaghetti dinners or brat sales, all ways to engage in fundraisers. But the vast majority of funding for the mission and ministry of our congregations comes in through individual donations. Indeed, in most congregations, over 80 or 90% of the funding for the church comes through individual donations. And many of those first begin as a pledge. So I want us to think about what it means for a person to make a pledge, why it is they pledge, and what they're saying when they do so. Often when we think about pledging, we think of why it's helpful for the church. And certainly it is helpful to have to know what people will give in the coming year when we're making a budget. But why is it that the person, the member or friend of your congregation, would, for their own discipleship, want to make a pledge? When my family and I sit down and make our pledge to our local congregation, it really reflects four things, and each of those four things is connected to Jesus' greatest commandment. Jesus told us to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so for us, when we make that pledge, we know in our hearts that sense of connection to our local community, our sense of heartfelt gratitude for what our local church does. In our mind, we know that the church needs to plan and budget for the year ahead. We know in our mind that that's an important thing for us to help with. In our soul, we experience the hope that comes from looking ahead to the future, from being a part of the future. That's what we feel, that sense of hope, when we make a pledge. And in our strength, our pledge comes out of our strength, our ability to help people beyond ourselves and to make a difference in the world. And in all of this connects us to the mission and the ministry of our local church as it engages us in loving our neighbors. For all of those watching this video, I invite you to consider these questions. Why do you make a pledge of support to your local congregation? What motivates you to make a pledge? How does this commitment change your relationship with your local church?